justice in Uganda. So take it away.
Hi, thank you, everybody. We are so excited to be here today. We're so excited to be sharing our research with you. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the Refugee Law Project team that's online, as well as to Ulrike for being online as well. So as you heard, our project is on post-conflict family structures and social cohesion in northern Uganda. And thank you for introducing us, Erin. I'm Rebecca, and these are my teammates, Elizabeth, Paige, and Hassan. And our client knows the context really well, but for everyone who's a little bit less familiar, a little bit of background. In the northern part of Uganda, so this green part that's highlighted here is the Acholi subregion. And there's a protracted domestic conflict between the LRA, or the Lord's Resistance Army, and the government of Uganda's military. And this began shortly after the current president, Yoweri Museveni, came into power in 1986. And so family structures were greatly affected by this, both through overt policies and indirect effects of the conflict. So for example, the LRA had a policy of mass abduction of children and youth from northern Uganda. This was a means to recruit and train soldiers, and young women and girls were forced into marriage with the commanders, creating families within the military organization. Meanwhile, 1.8 million people, or 90% of the population in northern Uganda, was displaced into IDP, or internally displaced persons camps. This separated families, it removed people from their traditional land, and it interrupted norms and roles. And so this is a big topic. And so entering into transitional justice, the National Transitional Justice Policy was adopted in 2019 in northern Uganda. But there has yet to be adoption of a transitional justice bill, and in some ways implementation has lagged. And so entering into this, we looked at how Ugandan advocates have been calling for justice to be holistic, relational, and lived in the everyday. So we really wanted to look at relationships and how they've been affected by conflict, and how repair might serve to further the goals of transitional justice. So we interviewed civil society organizations, community advocates, and local government officials, asking specifically about family structures, because families are a microcosm of society and are the building block of the nation. And so first we asked, okay, how were family structures prior to 1986? How were they structured in the Acholi region? And there was this overwhelming consensus about family structures being these large, collective, extended structures that often live together on a common plot of land, with an emphasis on sharing, on this collective orientation to the common good. One participant described what you're seeing here, which is these family structures as being a series of expanding interconnected relationships. So at the center, you see Ot. Ot means house in Uganda, or sorry, in Acholi. And that would be like the nuclear family. So you're thinking husband, wife, or wives, and their children. And then from there, you have Dog Ot, which would be homestead. So that's bringing together the extended family. From there, Kaka, which is clan. And then from there, you're expanding to the Acholi people. And then we looked at family structures as they are now. And participants commented on how families are increasingly nuclear. So that's a big difference from the collective structures that they used to be. There also is an increasing amount of sole parent and usually female-headed households, which is a big change from more patriarchal structures. And then also more youth-led households. So that's a big difference from these multi-generational households. And we're referring to youth-led households as households where somebody became the head of the household while before becoming an adult. So looking at how these family structures have changed, then we looked at the roles, the functions that families fill within society, and we wanted to see how the ability of a family to fulfill a function in society has also changed with that structural change. So we looked at three functions, the first being the division of roles and responsibilities, the second being access to resources, especially land, and then the third being the transmission of cultural values and norms. And I'll hand it off to my teammates to discuss each of these functions.
Thank you, Rebecca. To look at how roles and responsibilities shifted family functions in Acholi, we use the gender lens. And this is because we understand that gender roles lay the structure of families in Acholi region. Traditionally, men are the leaders in the home. They are the main economic agents. They work the farm, they till the soil, and they bring the produce home. They are also the enforcement agents. They ensure there's justice, law, order. They also perform some care roles by ensuring there's security within the family. Women in Acholi family play a more complementary role to that of the men. So where men bring the produce, the women distribute this produce. Women are also responsible for division of labor within the household, while maintaining active care agent status. This changed significantly during conflict. As families were forced into IDP camps, movement and mobility was greatly restricted for men because they didn't want them to be drafted into the war. As a result, women gained more mobility and access. This eased them slowly into the economic agent status because they then started working the farms and tilling the soil. Interventions like World Food Program would also identify women and hand them food to distribute within their household. These acts slowly sealed their role as economic agents within the household. Post-conflict, when they left the camps, we saw an emerging of nuclearized family, as Rebecca mentioned, and these are families that have father, mother, and their children present. But what has happened is that role shift that took place in IDP camps has now been solidified, such that we saw an emerging theme of responsibility fatigue for women and loss of identity for men. The responsibility fatigue for women is because while they maintained economic agent status, they were still maintaining their role as main care agents while still distributing traditional roles. Men, on the other hand, now saw that their identity that is strictly linked to their roles that has now been taken by women is somehow displaced. And when they try to take on care roles that are traditionally ascribed to women, they face stigma. Result of this is an increase in sexual and gender-based violence within the home. Though men appear more from our analysis as perpetrators, we saw cases where it was mentioned that women also perpetrate abuse within the home, but this has gone greatly underreported. As a result, social cohesion fabric within the family unit, which is the basis, has now been fragmented. So we do have some recommendations on how we believe this can be. How we believe this can be worked within the family. We recommend an extensive educational outreach where to precede any intervention with a bottom-up approach where cultural norms and practices are embedded into this framework. We also recommend psychosocial support for men at the community level where a trauma-informed response or trauma-informed framework is used in intervention or implementing these interventions. We also recommend a culturally contextual approach be embedded in the interventions that currently exist. I will now hand it to Paige, who will speak on how functions have shifted in access to resources.
So land is the backbone. Land is the backbone of survival in Uganda. Before the conflict, subsistence farming was the main source of livelihood in the region. Extended families lived on shared compounds, farming and raising livestock to produce food that would be shared communally. Family traditionally governs access to this communal land through customary land laws, which remain the principal way of governing land today. Land is passed down traditionally through patrilineal lines, as men stay on the family compound as they marry and gain access to the shared land. Women, on the other hand, their access to land and the resources it produces is very much governed through their relationships. As children, girls are dependent on their fathers and their father's clan to act for access to this land. And when they mature, women gain access through their husbands through traditional marriage practices. During the conflict, as people were forcibly displaced from their land into IDP camps, these relationships that govern and this governance system was disrupted. Customary land laws are built to distribute land through these extended family forms. So the emergence of nuclear, sole parent, and youth-led households means that some people have become excluded from this livelihood source. So land is the most pervasive issue post-conflict and was mentioned by all of our interviewees as a source of ongoing tension in northern Uganda. Women who married without traditional courtship, which was common during the conflict, faced rejection from their husband's clan. And mothers who are not able to access land for themselves are not able to provide security for themselves and their children, especially for their sons who will likely not have access to land as they mature. Youth-led families also face many challenges accessing land, as their mothers' illegitimate marriages and lack of information regarding their father's clan complicate land claims. Excuse me. With male children, there's been some success in family tracing and reunification programs where civil society organizations facilitate connections between children and their paternal clans. However, economic pressures that have been placed on families since the conflict complicate these land claims, as resources are less communally shared, as families just have less resources to share. So many struggle to support just their nuclear family unit, and they lack the capacity to aid more people. This makes it challenging for women and youth to access land or to make land claims, as they're seen as competing for the small amount of resources that are available. So with all of this, our recommendation is to supporting pathways for land for these marginalized family structures needs to be a priority, whether through family tracing and reunification efforts, strengthening kin networks, or challenging land ownership practices that justify inequitable land rights for men and women. I'll now pass it off to Hasten to continue.
Thank you. So a third aspect of the family that we looked at was the transmission of culture. And in this, we looked at several functions. The first was the Wang-O, which was a regular fireside gathering that used to be held communally with the whole family. And many interviewees have said that this is no longer happening due to displacement of elders, the increasingly nuclear family structures that we've talked about, and also the unfortunate and sad loss of life in the conflict. Another aspect is the disciplining of children. In the past, children were disciplined by any member of their community. This could be any senior member that was just passing by and saw them doing something that was wrong. This indicated a shared system of discipline and morals that was passed down through the community. This is something that's no longer happening, and many interviewees have said that if you attempted to discipline someone else's child today, you'd be met with animosity and suspicion. This again points to a decreasing sense of trust and an erosion of social cohesion within the community. And then a third aspect that we looked at was that the children that were born during the conflict and people that were born before the conflicts have a large generational gap in that they don't understand the culture that used to be. They don't have a connection to their ancestral heritage. And so there is a difficulty in these people with identifying with their larger communities. And this again points to, you know, the increasingly nuclearized and shrinking community where there's less of a sharing in the common sense of morals and ideals. And while this is prominent across all of or most of society, this is most prominent in youth-led families where there is no parental connection. They are unable to access their resources, their culture, all these issues. And so one recommendation in this is that we would recommend communal and intergenerational dialogue that is holistic and comprehensive. What that means is that we need to try to rebuild or reinforce these missing avenues or forums for cultural transmission that used to be in the family and is no longer there. And an example would be inviting cultural leaders to schools to talk about these traditional cultures that are no longer being passed down in families. This helps reinforce some of the missing pathways of cultural transmission. And we are aware that there are some people that are already doing initiatives similar, and we would call for more widespread adoption of similar initiatives. And so wrapping up, this is an Acholi proverb. I hope I don't get this wrong. Ribaye teko, which means togetherness is strength. And it really is the underlying thought for all of our presentation. Early in our research, we looked at the transitional justice policy, which had nation building as a core pillar. And then we looked at the general idea of family as the building blocks of society and nation. And then we looked at social cohesion as the glue holding these building blocks together. So this quote from an interview really put it best, is that togetherness is strength. And when we properly implement good initiatives that can build social cohesion, that's when we can truly build a strong nation. Thank you very much for your mate.
Am I on? Yes. So Ofoyomatek as well to this team, and having worked in northern Uganda for 20 years, that was just such a beautiful unfolding of what is a tragedy for its impact on families and livelihoods and communities. And I think you got it right by centering it through the family and what holds families together. And how this could, it's very basic, what could feed into the transitional justice policy. So you're bringing really this bottom up perspective and making it meaningful to the community. So well done. We have with us Pius Ojera, who is the president of Refugee Law Project. Pius, it's wonderful to meet with you and good to see you. We also have the faculty lead, Ulrike Lühe. And we have I believe, the new coordinator of research and documentation at Refugee Law Project, Professor Boniface Ajok. Hello, good morning to all of you from here. We'll turn it over to you first. You've heard the presentation, you've witnessed the students' work. Can you now challenge them a little further, ask them a few questions about their work itself? Pius, can I invite you to do that first?
Okay. Thank you very much. I thought there was quite an energy. I could feel some energy, and that was really good. And clearly, there was quite a bit of intellectual investment in understanding the impact of the war on the family. Quite spot on. I wanted to add a few things. One is both with respect to the family belonging and the land question, is the dilemmas of belonging of children born of war. They are not accepted by the clan of their mothers because their fathers are not known. And because they are not accepted, they cannot inherit the traditional land. And so there's the question of where do they belong? They can't even marry because people don't want to marry somebody whose clan they don't know and can't identify with. So they are in a very difficult position in that sense. That's what I wanted to highlight around that question of land and family. So for them also, the very definition of the family, which is really normally the primary space for belonging, which also gives you a sense of sovereignty, which for us is very much connected with the land, is missing, or at least is problematized. So that's a big one. And then the second thing is we no longer have a sense of common history. As you said, 1.0, which is really like the traditional fire camp, where the elders would tell the story, but these stories were transmitting values and etiquette around behaviors, around attitude, around morals. That's gone. So the sense of common history is also lost. So to even try to forge a common understanding of the community has become a problem. And with that is also what the family is, has become a problem. A lot of the people around my generation have very distorted views. My generation and younger have very distorted view of the community. They don't even know what the family looks like, because a lot of the young people were born in the camps, people in the camps for 22 years. That's all they know. What they remember and what they recall is their dad being redundant, drinking, unproductive, that's the memory they have. So that's also very important to, I know you didn't have enough time in some ways to maybe get those subtleties. A lot of those people now in charge, even of government, are these people. So that is part of the dilemmas that the communities are facing. And that's what I wanted to highlight. So the
Thank you, Pius.
negotiation of identity is so serious in that sense. And
Thank
even
you so
social
much.
relations, yeah.
Yeah, an excellent reflection of your findings and the importance of intergenerational knowledge transmission, and a question to you about the particular plight of children born of war. But let's also hear a question from Professor Ojok, and then maybe you can address those together.
Thank you very, very much. Hello, I'm very happy to see the team that was here with us in Kampala and Gulu. You're putting up a very good show. We're so proud of you on behalf of RLP. Yeah, you look more serious than when you were here. We congratulate you for growing up. Yeah, I mean, the time, of course, that you spent here was so short but memorable. We appreciate that. And I like the fact that you were able to quickly pick up the nuances around, to center your arguments around the context, abduction and displacement, which has distorted livelihood and basically households in northern Uganda. And I appreciate that within that short time. The only thing I would probably add maybe to look at some of the roles of some of the mediating factors that impact the family, such as variables such as the rural, the urban. Do we have the same context? What are you describing? What about the situation in the rural areas? Is it quite different? I know you didn't have time to go and visit some of the rural locations. Those are mediating factors. The questions of religion, which of course also influences whether someone goes for extended family or adopts the neutral family as a way of life. There are questions to do with intermarriages, which are setting in, perhaps those areas that you also want to look at, and perhaps also you look at educational background as a mediating factor, people now opting for no marriage or actually going for neutral versus extended family settings. And of course, against which we have this whole question of erosion of our cultural values, which have also centered around one mediating factor, which is poverty, that the region you're studying is, again, centered on a very poor post-conflict area with households reporting some of the worst indicators of livelihood in Uganda. So for me, it's a little bit reflection on those, but also I appreciate Pius for bringing in the question of those who return from the war as a result of abduction and how they cope with the absence of the traditional families, but later again forge a way of life that in itself can also be referred to as, according to them, a family. So these are all things that you could go on and on discussing. And finally, the role of the interventions such as NGOs and so forth that are also filtered and affected the way you perceive families and roles of men and women within a home. So these are just very quickly things I thought I would add. Thank you very much. Otherwise,
Thank you. Thank you, Boniface. Great reflections, a lot in there. But I believe the common theme is children born of war. Was there anything unique or particular to that in your research? And as Boniface said, there are a lot of intersections, rural versus urban, education versus not. So if you could maybe talk to us a little bit about those intersections.
I'm happy to start. Of course, everything that you mentioned, like it's a really complex issue. And I think that Dr. Ojara, what you brought up with, like the declining social cohesion within and amongst families, it's not only an effect of conflict, but it's also a cause of further issues. And I think that's a really difficult challenge to try and address, because you can't just say, okay, if families are like, if there's declining social cohesion within and amongst families, then let's just go back to the way things were. Like, that's obviously not a path forward for everybody, including children born of war. And one of I remember hearing in our interviews about these family reunification projects. And, for some, that was great. Some were able to track down their fathers and were able to go and live with their fathers and gain access to land that way. And that was great for those for whom it worked. But I remember one participant saying, well, these children only ended up staying, only in one of our projects, only 6 of the 30 that we tracked down actually ended up staying with their fathers. And so what happens for those for whom that doesn't work? I think one of the things to keep in mind is that in these situations, it's always a little bit of a two-pronged approach where you're looking at both strengthening what's there and what you the family connections that you still have or you're able to track down, but also making sure that there are alternatives for people for whom that is not an option. And I think that also that like 6 of 30 also speaks to, how do we define success in these cases when things are so complex? I think that, in that case, the interview participant was talking about that as a success, even though that was such a small number, because these issues are really complex. So yeah, I think I just wanted to bring up kind of that these issues need to be people need to have multiple options. They need to have multiple routes. And another one of our interviewees was saying, okay, well, I don't know my father. My brother doesn't know his father. So what we're doing, we're saving up and we're buying a plot of land together. So they're not accessing land through traditional means, but they are trying to reestablish some sort of family structure that might have looked the way they would have expected it to. And that's also not an option that's available to everybody, but it's another example of like people are trying to get creative and find a variety of solutions. So those, anybody else want to add?
Yeah, thank you for the comments. As you've mentioned, it's a very complex and a multifaceted intersectional conflict, and part of it was due to research constraints. There was only so much we could look at, and while many of these problems did show up in our data, it did not end up becoming the main focus simply because it wasn't as prominent in our data. And considering some of the numbers we looked at, right, like 90% of Northern Uganda was displaced, and we're seeing similarly high numbers in many of the other sad realities that have happened. And so there's only so much we could work on. And as you know, we were there for 6 days, so we've tried our best, but it's difficult to capture the multifaceted difficulties, and we tried.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. We were squeezed for time, so we're going to turn it over to the faculty lead, Dr. Ulrike Lühe, to pose a question or two, short question or two.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I can't be there, but yeah, thank you to the group for the amazing work you've done, and congratulations on the report you've produced. Maybe one short question, based on your presentation, you obviously have quite a few recommendations that I think target potentially different layers or levels of action or intervention. And I think we all know that resources are always short and they're only going to be decreasing in the next couple of months and years. So is there one recommendation that you feel would make the most impact, and why is that? Maybe one that with this really the most could be achieved.
Thank you for the question. Just on that, we really tried to be cognizant of the lack of resources. That is always an issue in any sort of community program, especially in this context. So we tried to frame our recommendations as almost like best practices. So when designing a community program, or if you wanted to improve a program at the local level, having some considerations. So things like community sensitization, things that might be a lower cost that can be implemented in with an already existing program to kind of help with that lack of resources. But I think if anything that we really want to take away from our data and from our recommendations is that any intervention really needs to understand and acknowledge these complex relationships between individuals within the family and between families, because as a lot of our data showed, when interventions don't take that into account and they target just one population without kind of acknowledging or understanding like what the repercussions will be for people connected to those people, they don't work very well. So I think really understanding that complex web of relationships and how that can inform people's behavior and the impact of an intervention.
Okay, I think we're now really maxed out of time. So we're going to have to say thank you very much to Dr. Lühe, Dr. Jarrow, and Dr. Ajak for the fabulous job that you've done in guiding this team, but this team for rising to that challenge to meeting those complex issues. Let's have a big round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.